Welcome back. We do have attorney Mngomezulu Osmond standing by to talk to us about justice for survivors of the Marshalltown fire. But before we get to him, we have some important breaking news for our viewers this morning. We were meant to talk with Ashraf Skeik from Palestine about the situation, but we're having connectivity problems. So let's share the information with you. The Israel military takes over Rafah crossing as city very close to a full invasion. It's been a very difficult night the past 12 hours. It's been very violent, very bloody, and full of destruction, as the Israeli military has deployed all kinds of weaponry in the eastern part of Rafah. As of this hour, the Israeli military has officially taken over the Rafah crossing. It's strategically cutting off the Gaza Strip and sealing it off from the region. It's not only a point of entry for passengers to get in and out of Gaza, but since the beginning of this war has been a major point of humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. With the Israeli military presence there right now, we can safely say that we're looking at a very difficult situation in terms of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. At the same time, when we look at the location of the Rafah crossing at almost the center of the city, that indicates that we're very close to a full invasion of Rafah. Reuters has filed this following report, and it goes on to headline, Gaza aid halted as Israel tanks take control of Rafah border crossing with Egypt. The Reuters news agency reports that flows of aid to Gaza have halted through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt following Israeli forces taking control of the Palestinian side of the frontier. 3 sources in the area of humanitarian relief told the news agency that shipments of crucial supplies had halted. Senior UN officials have repeatedly warned of a humanitarian catastrophe in Rafah should Israel launch a ground invasion of what was until recently a last refuge from Israeli attack. End of report. And let's move on then. After that very devastating story, we move on to our final interview of the morning. And let's welcome to the program Advocate Mngomezulu Osmond. You are obviously representing socio-economic rights, and you are from that particular institute. You are an attorney there. Excuse me, I refer to you as advocate, but you are in fact an attorney. You are here to talk to me about justice for survivors of the Marshalltown fire. We also understand that the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign welcomes Usindiso Commission report, which demands full accountability and compensation. So what exactly does this all mean? And please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I had
Good morning.
Welcome.
Welcome. I'm sorry. The connection is not the greatest. I wonder if you can hear me because you were breaking in your intro.
Okay, I can hear you loudly and
Yes.
clearly. Thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. Yes, I'm an attorney at SERI, being the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, based in Johannesburg. We were participating in the commission. We are one of the parties that are cited as having contributed to the commission of inquiry, and we were representing SERI as an organization and the Inner City Federation, with a view to ensure that the commission's findings are informed by the lived realities of the residents of the inner city. And whilst we did not represent the survivors and the families of the victims directly, those were represented by our counterparts from Norton Rose Fulbright attorneys. But our positions were sort of aligned. We supported they position that the commission should make recommendations regarding compensation and the housing solutions. Compensation, socio-economic opportunities, and housing solutions for the survivors of the fire.
Now, before I go to the demands by Justice for Survivors of the Marshalltown fire, I had read a report a little while ago that the fire was started by a man who'd had a fight with his wife or his girlfriend, and out of anger towards her, he set the apartment and the building on fire. Does that change any of the support being given to all of the people, knowing that it was a deliberate act of anger and arson by possibly a jilted lover? If I can use that word. And this has led to this disaster. But in the same token, I also then want to talk about accountability regarding City of Joburg and, of course, the Johannesburg Property Company, because it is and must be in their interest, apart from the fact that that building was burned down due to arson and a vicious attack, a vicious action by this crazy person. We do have a situation in the CBD of buildings that are in a poor state, in a very derelict state, and people are actually occupying those buildings. And those are actually accidents waiting to happen. Osmond, over to you.
Yes. Um, well, the issue of culpability of witness X, who has been called witness X in the report, that's a person who testified in camera and sort of confessed or admitted to have caused the fire. That's what the report says. But the commission has not reached conclusive findings in that regard, because it becomes a criminal matter that must be processed through the criminal justice system. And the commission has recommended that the investigation by the SAPS and prosecution should take place. And I think it will be after that process, the criminal justice process has concluded, that we have a final conclusion on what may have happened, and the commission has correctly referred that to the correct authorities. A final determination in that regard by the NPA and the courts has not been made. But what the commission has found is that the City of Johannesburg and its entity, the Johannesburg Property Company, are partially responsible and liable for the circumstances at Usindiso building. And we welcome that finding, because the City of Johannesburg is both the owner of the property and the local authority that is meant to enforce bylaws in that area where Usindiso building is situated. And the commission found that it has failed in both respects. And the commission also correctly says the victims of the fire cannot be blamed for their deaths and injuries. And we support such a finding because we know that there is homelessness and landlessness, and there are these buildings that are called problem buildings by the City of Johannesburg that are occupied by families, and they lack basic services, and they are not compliant with the bylaws, including the water bylaws, fire bylaws, emergency services, and the like. And as the local authority that is tasked with ensuring compliance with the bylaws, the City of Johannesburg ought to have done more. And the Commission correctly finds that had the city done its work, both as the local authority and as the owner, the consequences of the fire would have been mitigated.
And of course, as I had just mentioned earlier on, there are very many other derelict buildings in the city, and they're being occupied by people, by families. And please God, we don't want to see another disaster like that playing out. So, what are the demands by SERI regarding compensation for the people affected in this fire?
Well, the commission is divided into two parts. Part one dealt with the circumstances at Usindiso building. And part two, which commences on 13 May, will look at the inner city broadly, the prevalence of such building, the so-called problem buildings. And SERI will be participating in those proceedings. And we shall await those processes, the investigation by the commission and the resultant report that will follow. But in relation to the issue of compensation for the victims, it's a case that was put forward by the representatives from Northern Rose representing the victims. And we also supported that and made submissions that there ought to be compensation and housing solutions for those that were left injured and displaced. We are disappointed that the Commission has declined that invitation to make that recommendation. The Commission found that that aspect falls outside of its mandate, but obviously that does not preclude the victims and survivors from pursuing remedies through alternative dispute resolutions, such as possibly lodging a civil claim or engagements directly with the city and the provincial government.
If the city was open to all of your demands, and I mean, you are representing people who are truly marginalized since they've been affected by this fire, how many families are we looking at, and what sort of reasonable accommodation have you at SERI requested? I'm thinking about what are you expecting each family to be paid out monetarily? And of course, there's also the question of housing. What does that scenario look like?
Right. On the issue of compensation, we had not put a figure. And the reason being, we do not directly represent the survivors and the families of those who perished. They are represented by a firm of attorneys based in Sandton, not in Rose Fulbright. But they had also not put in a figure because this is more of an invitation to make a good faith settlement than a demand for payment. That has certainly not taken place yet. It was an invitation by the parties to the commission to make a finding in that regard and recommendations, and the commission said that aspect falls outside of its mandate. And the socio-economic opportunities, that request came from the fact that some of the survivors were informal traders who lost all their belongings, including their stock, in the fire and have been unable to go back to informal trading. And when they were appearing in the commission, they were requesting assistance with returning to business or stock so that they could trade and be self-sufficient. And the issue of housing, of a housing solution, we know that the building was occupied by hundreds of people, and they were displaced. Other than the 76 that were confirmed to have died, there were hundreds that were displaced and became homeless. A few was moved to Denver, which is an in-transit, in sort of informal settlement built on corrugated iron. And the witnesses, the occupiers, appeared before the commission and testified about their living conditions there at Denver as being not conducive, particularly during the rain and the spaces. So that's the aspect that we had requested the commission to also look at what happens to the victims in the aftermath of the fire.
And finally, how soon do you believe this issue can be settled? Because I've seen clips of the temporary housing in Denver that these people are, being accommodated in, and the situation doesn't look good at all. Their shacks or their structures are being flooded when it rains, etc. How soon do you think these people can be decently housed or accommodated so that their misery can end, and not only Siri but the property company, the Johannesburg Property Company, can start looking at other buildings and start upgrading it for other homeless people?
Well, correct. The way in which you ask that question, the victims have already suffered. They lost their loved ones. They saw people dying in their presence and getting injured. They themselves are injured, and some of them have been left with disabilities. And as a response after the fire, the authorities, including Department of Home Affairs, arrested those that were in the country without any documentation, and we're planning to deport them. The attorneys, Norton Rose Fulbright, launched a High Court application saying those survivors should not be deported because the commission was still underway. They could potentially be witnesses, and the commission has now that part of the commission has now concluded, and the commission says those processes may be taken to finality, meaning they could be processed for deportation. And others who were not deported have become displaced, and others live in Denver. A few live in Denver, under those conditions that you've described. So we heard the Premier of Gauteng, when receiving the report from the judge, that there will be an implementation committee that will be established between the province and the municipality. And we hope that as part of on the agenda of that implementation committee will be those issues relating to either compensation, socio-economic opportunities, and housing solutions for the survivors. But if that is not addressed through the implementation committee, we believe that the living conditions at Denver fall squarely within the part 2 of the terms of reference of the commission. And we will certainly be recommending that the commission conducts an inspection at Denver, because what you have there, it's not only the residents of Usindiso, but there are also occupiers who were removed from other bad buildings and had been moved to Denver. And the city has told the commission that that's how it deals with evacuations from bad buildings. So it is important for the commission to assess for itself, as part of investigation, to look at those living conditions at Denver and see if they constitute an adequate response to the challenges faced by the residents of the so-called problem buildings in the inner city.
Thank you indeed. We will keep our eye on this story, and we do hope for a speedy and a favorable outcome for the peoples that have been affected, the victims of that fire. Thank you indeed for being with us on the show this morning, and God bless for the amazing work you guys are doing. So thank you once again. And of course, that means it's wrap up time for me. Thank you for your company on the show this morning. From my side till Monday morning at the same time, as always. I know that we've had technical glitches this morning, and our technical producer was really battling to get the show on the road. So a big thank you to you, Abdul Salam, and also to our content producer, Nasreen Naidu. Till you and I get together again, take care. I love you with one and all. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.